evening, everyone, and welcome to the LSE for tonight's event. My name is Rebecca Campbell, and I'm a fellow in the Department of Management here at the London School of Economics and Political Science. I am absolutely delighted to welcome Farrah here to the LSE today, and Farrah's talk is the latest in our Women in Business public lecture series. So, Farrah has the kind of CV that fills most mortals with deep inadequacy. She is the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan magazine, where she has helped increase sales by an unprecedented 59%. Before this, she was the launch editor of Women's Health magazine, which was the most successful women's magazine launch of the millennium. In 2018, Farrah was named as one of the most powerful BAME leaders in the country by The Guardian. She's also a regular spokesperson on women's issues, diversity, and careers. And that clearly wasn't enough.
I feel inadequate. That doesn't sound like me.
So she's now authored her first book, part memoir and part practical self-help guide, called The Discomfort Zone. In the book, Farrah really delightfully draws on examples from her own life, as well as those of other high achievers. And she argues that success can really only be achieved if we are prepared to step out of our comfort zone. To quote Farrah, we are sleepwalking into a world made for comfort. And she thinks we all need to toughen up, as the world needs people who are built for battle. I'm making her sound really fierce, but she's also frank and really funny. I read her description of going onto stage in front of 20,000 people, and, you know, with basically no warning. And it made me laugh, but actually more accurately, it actually made me break out into cold sweat even reading about it. So before I hand over to Farrah, some housekeeping notes. For the Twitter users in the audience, the hashtag for tonight's event is hashtag LSE Women In. Can I please remind everyone to turn their phones on to silent? This evening's event is being recorded and will hopefully be made into a podcast, subject to nothing going wrong technically. Tonight's lecture is also being live streamed on Facebook. As usual, after Farrah's lecture, there will be a chance for you guys to put your questions to her. There will also be a book signing taking place following the event just in the foyer outside. In the very unlikely event of a fire warning, we're all meant to assemble on the southwest corner of Lincoln's Inn Fields, which is opposite this building entrance and Cooper's. But now, will you please join me in welcoming Farrah to deliver her lecture on how to succeed outside your comfort zone.
Is that the clicker? I'm going to hold on to it. Yeah. So does it not get made into a podcast if I swear? Does it depend on that?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay. We'll see how I go. I'll try and keep it very clean. But I am the editor of Cosmo, so it might be quite difficult. First of all, thank you so much. God, it's amazing to see so many of you on, it's Monday night, right? Is it Monday?
Monday night.
On Monday night.
Yep.
So first of all, I just want to begin this talk by asking a small favour of all of you. So in a minute, if you don't mind, I'd like you to all close your eyes. Not quite yet. I'm going to explain why. It's not going to be some sort of mass hypnotism. But I want you to spool back your memory, and I want you to try and remember, if you can, your very earliest memory of feeling really afraid. Okay, so if you all close your eyes now, okay, and I'm going to, you've not got long, you're about 10 to 20 seconds. If you have a think, go as far back in childhood as you possibly can and think about that moment when you first remember registering fear. And not to make anyone more fearful, but I am going to pounce on some people in a minute and ask them to share that experience. So I'll give you 10 more seconds. Okay. That should be enough time. I'm actually going to ask the volunteers, because it's very unfair, because I will pick the one person who actually was in the middle of roaming through their childhood. Can anyone put their hands up? Can anyone just share? I just need two, and in the name of equality, let's have one guy and one woman as well. So, gentleman very quickly put his hand up. So obviously that's a very vivid memory. You have to speak quite loudly. Do you have like do you remember like one specific moment when you...
Yeah, being like around my brother's friends. Oh, amazing. Being like around my brother's friends when I was like, I don't know, 6 or something, and they're very like boisterous and mask.
I'm
and
feeling
like
really
this,
frightened by
yeah,
that.
when I was younger.
Yeah, okay, great. And can I have a lady? Lady here, just actually to your right-hand side.
When I was about 4, I went to the zoo with my cousins, and my older cousin turned me upside down and dangled me by my legs, and he was like, "I'm going to throw you in the lion's pit."
Oh, my word. Wow. Oh, my word. Okay. That's probably quite traumatic. I wasn't expecting that. Okay. So is there anybody here, and I just need a show of hands, is there anybody here whose fear was of hearing a very, very loud noise? Is there anybody here? Okay, lady here, a couple of people at the back. No one on this side. Okay. And is there anybody here whose earliest fear was of falling off something or falling from a height? So a couple of people here. Okay, thank you. So you guys obviously thought really far back, because actually there's a belief that actually we are born with 2 intrinsic fears. And those fears are fear of falling, so from a height of some sort, and fear of loud noises. So that's what it's thought, that's what scientists believe we are born with when we come into the world. So what that means is every other fear that we have, so fear of confined spaces, fear of spiders, perhaps fear of speaking publicly, fear of anyone whose Tinder biog says they're free, adventurous, and not looking for anything complicated. These are fears that we accrue over time. We accrue them through experience. Sometimes we accrue them through the culture in which we're brought up in. But there are some people who are actually born slightly more fearful than others. And in fact, it's thought it's around, I think it's 1 in 5 babies are born inhibited. So they're inhibited children. And you can tell, scientists believe, who those kids are, because when they see those kind of Playmobiles hanging from the ceiling, rather than interacting with them and laughing, as most children are inclined to do, what they do is they arch their back and they start to cry. Now, that's only 1 in 5 babies. And out of those 1 in 5 babies, 2/3 of them remain quite inhibited. So they remain quite anxious individuals when they go off into adult life. So it begs the question, well, what happened to the other third? Well, it's not that the other third were presented with a world which was free and easy. And it's not actually that they stopped being implicitly fearful. It's that, as they grew up, they realised that the world was a tough place. But they figured out that actually we can be tougher, that actually the human body and mind is designed to work at its optimum under a little bit of pressure. Human beings are designed to carry a load. And so that's what they figured out. They went out in the world, which was tough and it was difficult, but they understood that the way that you deal with that is you are brave. And I know this because I was one of those inhibited children. So when I was born, I kind of came out kicking and screaming, and I never really stopped until I got to kind of my teenage years. I was a really, really fretful little girl. You know, my mum would drop me off at nursery, and I would be the child that was there screaming, like really hysterically for hours until I was hoarse, until I remember I couldn't actually articulate, and I'd be banging my fists against the wall. And it didn't change. I was like that. I moved from school to school. Other children frightened me. Teachers frightened me. I was the little girl that, you know, when people would come into the family home, I would hide behind my mum and dad's knees. And this was exacerbated. You know, I was further coddled by the fact that I was a middle child. So I have a younger brother who's very outgoing, but I also have 2 older siblings. So I have an older sister who is very bold, very ambitious, very extroverted, and I had an older brother. And as some of you, do we have any middle children here? You just raise your hand. Oh, wow, okay. The high achievers middle children, so there you go. They're trying to prove a point to the world. But the problem with being a middle child, and certainly this was my experience, it may not be your experience, but my experience was I became further coddled. So, you know, my sister and my brother, they would fight my battles for me. You know, they would break barriers for me. You know, at school, I was protected from kind of sharking bullies because I had an elder sister and an elder brother in the same school. And they kind of, and I think elder siblings can do this, they kind of taste test the world for you. They kind of pre-digest it and then they hand it to you and go, this is all that's good about the world. And you don't need to worry about the bad stuff because we've sorted it out for you. And so I grew up in this kind of, surrounded really, which I thought was amazing at the time, this kind of proverbial comfort blanket, where really I didn't have to do very much to justify my existence. And it was a travesty. It really was, because when my sister and my brother, as of course was always going to happen, when they moved out of the family home, they left Manchester, I was alone. And so I knew that I needed to do something which was going to test who I was, because I didn't really have a sense of, you know, what my weaknesses were, what my strengths were. I didn't know anything about myself. You know, I was kind of living somebody else's life. And so when I was 21, I went to Paris. And I barely spoke a word of French. I got a job teaching English to a school which, unbeknownst to me, was in one of the toughest suburbs in all of Paris and the toughest school in that suburb. So it was, I mean, they called it show, like it was a really, really hard school. I moved in with a couple of mime artists. That was not easy. And it was really scary, and I really, really struggled. And, you know, any of you that know Paris will know it can be socially quite a chilly place, so not an easy place to make friends at all. And I suppose I had a decision to make. I remember in the, I think it was about like week 6, and I'd had a really tough day in the class. They didn't want to listen. And I could either, I remember I did have the choice, and my mum had said, actually, you can come home if you want to. And I thought, no, I'm going to stick it out. And the next day, I remember I went into the classroom, and I don't know where it came from, but I managed to control the class. And actually, that experience in Paris, it taught me a lot. I was basically confronted with a lot of obstacles, which I'd never had to do before. And of course, obstacles, they teach you two things. They teach you your weaknesses. So that's why people often don't like moving through an obstacle, because, you know, you have an idea of who you think you are. And often obstacles present you with, well, you're not exactly who you thought you are. But also obstacles can teach you great, incredible truths about yourself. And so for me in Paris, I actually discovered I was okay in front of a crowd. You know, I could hold an audience, which I'd never thought that I would be able to do that before. And I was tough and I was street smart, that in a way that actually my parents had even told me that I was never going to be a tough street smart kid. I actually was. So that year in Paris was absolutely transformational to me, because I had stepped into my discomfort zone and it had rewarded me. It was tough, but it had rewarded me with great truths about myself. And actually, the truth is, most of the success I've had in my life and in my career, it has come from those moments of discomfort. All of them, in fact, hands down, every single one. My very first editorship, I edited a magazine called Women's Health. But actually, I edited it under very, very difficult circumstances. So editorships do not come along very often. And I remember I just moved back to England. I'd been living in Australia. I just moved back to England. I'd got a job for the first time. So I wasn't working for a while when my husband had moved back. I'd just taken on a mortgage. And I was told about this job that was going. And I remember, I thought it was a bit weird, because I had the job interview and I got offered the job about 45 minutes later. And I thought, this is really strange. And also they were like, we need you to walk out of your present job. You need to walk out, and then we need you to start tomorrow. So that was kind of the first difficult thing. But I decided to do it because, you know, editorships don't come up very often. Now, of course, when I had kind of walked out of my previous job, I kind of started to realise the challenges with this first editorship. And the challenges were really quite incredible for the industry, because I think it was 2011 or 2012. It was the tail end of 2011. And that was the first kind of cataclysmic time for magazines. Lots of magazines that I had worked on were closing. It was kind of the dawn of digital. And so people thought it was madness to launch a magazine in that climate. Because of that, the magazine was going to be very lean to start with. So I only had 2 members of staff, none of who could write. They were visual people, but they couldn't write. So it was just going to be me. And we had almost no resources, very, very, very tiny budget. And the real kicker was we had 6 weeks in which to build a magazine, tone, personality, visuals. We had 6 weeks in which to do it, which fell over Christmas. And if we didn't sell 100,000 copies, 100,000 copies is a lot of copies. If we didn't sell 100,000 copies from issue 1, then the magazine was never going to go into issue 2. So we had these huge pressures really hanging over us. And the truth is we didn't actually have time to be scared. And I'll talk a bit later about actually if you have time to be scared, fear can overwhelm you. And actually you're kind of good for nothing. You're kind of food for worms if that happens. I mean, you've all seen stage fright, right? That's what can happen. So we didn't have time, and so we just had to get on with it. And we were like, right, we need to start a health magazine. Well, we can't afford any writers, we can't afford any visuals. And actually what happened is we started to think, because the magazines are secret projects when they're a new launch, you're not allowed to talk to anyone about them. So we couldn't even really seek outside help. And something I remember in these 4 walls, we're in a tiny room about this size, the 3 of us started to think very differently. The constraints with which we were presented forced us to trust our gut in a way that I had certainly never been told to trust my gut. I mean, you know, if it's between mind and gut, I was always told gut is just kind of these woo-woo feelings, you don't listen to it. But with women's health, I had to listen to my gut. And we also had to be bold and inventive because we didn't really have any other choice. And just to give you an example, I remember, and it's a shame I haven't got the visual to show you, but I remember it was coming up to deadline, and we had done a feature about breast health, and we were like, how are we going to show a picture of this? Because pictures can be very expensive, and particularly nice pictures which show kind of, you know, the female physique, they can be really, really expensive, and we just didn't have that sort of money. And I remember we were thinking, God, how are we going to do this? And I cannot remember which one of us it was. I'd love to say it was me, but I don't think it was. Somebody looked down at their knees. So they were sat on a chair, and I think they may have had nude tights on, and they looked down at their knees. They had a skirt on, and they were like, if you look from above, your knees look like giant breasts. And then we discovered if you wore nude shoes and then the tips of the shoe peeped out, it looked like a nipple. And so we were like, great. So the poor intern, we used her knees and we made her put on these. We made her put on these nude shoes, and it set the tone for all the visuals because I remember it was so incredible, and we blew it up huge. It was very audacious. And that really set the tone because when we launched issue 1, that was the visual that everybody kept saying, oh my God, have you seen the breasts? And because it was funny and because it was bold and because it was audacious, when we got to do issue 2, because actually we sold, by the skin of our teeth, 103,000 copies on issue 1, that became the template for what we did with visuals. They had to be kind of quite shocking. They had to be memorable. That would never have happened if we were not faced with the constraints with which we were. When I took on Cosmo, it was a different thing altogether. You know, I'd been at Women's Health for 3.5 years. I was just starting to get comfortable. I remember saying to my husband, it was in the June, and I said to my husband, I feel for the first time things are going really well with this magazine. And the magazine, just so you know, and I'm not saying this to be boastful, but I will explain why I'm telling you this in a minute, the magazine went on to become, I think it was the most successful magazine launch of the millennium. That would not have happened without the constraints that we were forced to work with. But I was just getting comfortable with Women's Health, and then I got a phone call, my CEO saying, look, how do you feel about Cosmo? Because we need to make some changes to it. Cosmo was a completely different beast because Cosmo was hugely resourced, big staff, a huge iconic brand, global brand. I think there were 65 issues when I took over. And actually what I was told to do was to rethink the formula. It had been so successful for so many years, but it hadn't been number 1 for 16, 17 years at that point. And I remember my CEO, who's a brilliant, brilliant woman, she said, I'm going to give you air cover, but you just need to get your head down, and in 6 months you need to get it back to number 1. And I thought, well, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I only know how to work under difficult conditions, and I had this big team. And within 3 months, 80% of them resigned. So I was kind of left back to what I'd had to begin with. But you know, those 6 people that stayed, again, we didn't have time to be scared. And I remember Cosmo, for any of you that are old enough to remember, one of the things that Cosmo was really famous for was its naked centerfolds, male naked centerfolds, its sex advice columns. And actually, my gut feeling and the gut instinct of the people that remained with me was, these are not relevant anymore, we just need to get rid of them. And I remember one person saying to me, if you get rid of these things from Cosmo, you will have uproar because these are the sacred cows of this magazine. And again, we had time ticking. And I knew that trusting my gut was the right thing to do. We just got rid of them. We didn't have, I think we had one complaint. And Cosmo, thank goodness, and that's not just down to me, that's down to my incredible team, some of whom are actually here this evening. We went back to being the #1 best-selling young women's magazine within 6 months. It would not have happened, I'm absolutely sure, if I had had this huge team, a huge amount of resources. I'm absolutely certain of it. I could give you lots of more examples from my life, but actually some of our greatest thinkers and leaders, again, worked incredibly well under constraint. Winston Churchill, one of our greatest leaders, arguably, not everyone will agree, but you know, certainly one of our greatest speakers, again, for most of his life was seen as little more than an irritable backbencher. But it was only when he took on the mantle of Prime Minister at possibly one of the most uncomfortable times in history. And he not only discovered his strength as a leader, but his absolute power and conviction as an orator. Frank Gehry, some of you will know, one of the world's most famous architects. His buildings are mesmeric. He has always said the only time he could never design a building was when a very, very rich client gave him 0 constraints to work with. And one of my favourite, kind of one of my personal heroes, whose constraint really kind of defined his career in a way, is Steven Spielberg. So Steven Spielberg, back in the summer of, I think it was the summer of 1974, was a 27-year-old director, and he was working on Martha's Vineyard shooting his second major motion picture. Now, he had a huge amount of pressure on him because he, at that point in his career, he was only really famous. I don't know if any of you here will remember, but there used to be a very cheesy kind of murder mystery program called Columbo. So he'd only really done Columbo. Do you remember? If anyone's laughing, they'll remember Columbo. He'd only really done Columbo, and he had done one film called The Sugarland Express, which had been, it had rave reviews from the critic, but it had bombed at the box office. So at 27, he took on a second film, and it was a film which in itself was highly challenging. It was a scare movie about a giant fish. And of course, most of you here will know it was Jaws. Now, when he decided to film Jaws, Spielberg, unlike most directors up until that point, he had decided that he didn't want to shove some actors on a moving tank and put moving imagery behind them to denote the sea. What he wanted to do was he wanted to shoot out at sea. And this really annoyed a lot of people. Some of the cast and crew almost drowned because it took so long to rig up. He often was left with very, very little daylight hours in which to film. So he was massively, massively behind in budget, and he was behind on filming. But his main thing was, well, how do I make a giant fish, a giant great white, scary? Now, the funny thing, and I'm just going to mention this because it is funny, apparently at the time, one of the producers said to him, can't you just get someone to train a great white and we'll just use that great white? I don't think they quite understood what they were dealing with at that point. But so what Spielberg decided to do, he said, right, what I'm going to do is I want to create the most menacing mechanical shark imaginable. So he asked around all the special effects people he knew in Hollywood, and all of them said, can't be done, I don't want the gig. So in the end, Spielberg actually coaxed a gentleman out of retirement to build Jaws. Actually, they called him Bruce after Spielberg's lawyer, I think. So he said, look, can you build me Bruce? So anyway, he went, yeah, okay, I can do it for you. He built Bruce to the tune of, I think, about $250,000, which you can imagine was a huge amount of money in the 1970s. The shark arrived, and there were quite a lot of problems with this shark because, first of all, it was slightly cross-eyed, so it didn't quite have the menacing effect that he was hoping for. It had these kind of comically white teeth, but the most crucial thing that was wrong with Jaws was it kept suffering from mechanical failure, and it kept having to go and be repaired. Time was ticking. Spielberg was like, it's not going to work, we can't delay this anymore. And so he was really, really forced into the absolute teeth of discomfort because he had everybody on his back. And actually, he did say Jaws was a film that should never have been made because it was such an impossible effort. But through all of that, somehow, he came up with an idea. And the idea was this, of course, which was, and those of you that have seen Jaws will know this, he decided, well, what about if the viewers don't see the shark? Is it perhaps what viewers can imagine in their minds? Is that always going to be scarier than what a special effects guy can deliver? And I just want you to be the judge of that. I'm just going to show you a small clip, which is just for a few minutes, but I just want you to see exactly what he achieved by using very, very simple props and leaning also as well on John Williams's two-note score. So So you can see, I think you'll agree actually, I think had he used mechanical Bruce, it wouldn't have been half as chilling as that. And actually, of course, what he added to that was, you probably noticed, he submerged cameras under the water so that actually you felt like you were under the water as well. All of these things came about because his original plan, his easy plan, didn't work. And of course, that effect, those of you that have seen Jurassic Park will know that that is something that Spielberg made into a trademark of his, because in Jurassic Park, of course, very famously, before the dinosaur arrives, you see the trembling glass of water, which again, you know, it inspires fear in the mind of the viewer. So obviously my creed occur to all of you is you should step into your discomfort zone. But you're probably sat there thinking, well, that's easy. If you're Spielberg, it's easy if it's you. It's pretty hard to do that, and I suppose my advice for you would be this. It's that, you know, when you are frightened, think about what happens to your body. Think about the physiological sensations that you have, right? So your palms get sweaty, your stomach feels like it's been macrame'd. You know, if you're like me, you need the toilet all the time. These, we are told, are symptoms of fear, and that's our body telling us that we're afraid. But of course, if you think about what happens when you're excited, very, very similar physiological feelings. And so if your body reacts in the same way, then it's your mind. And so actually scientists have found that, I feel like I can hear the Jaws music in the background. Is that just in my head? Scientists have discovered that actually it's what you tell yourself. So if you tell yourself, if you are feeling those sensations and you tell yourself, I feel challenged, I feel excited, I feel ready, something miraculous happens within your body. Your blood starts to circulate quicker around the body, your lungs expand, more oxygen gets to your brain, and you make sharper and smarter and quicker, I should say, decisions. But if you tell yourself that I'm feeling this way because I'm really afraid, well, I mentioned that earlier, we've all seen what happens. You've seen stage fright. People become completely clouded. They become incapacitated. And you only have a couple of nanoseconds in which to make that decision. When your body feels like that, you really got to tell yourself very quickly, am I afraid or do I feel excited? Do I feel ready to take on this challenge? And trust me, it really, really works. Before I leave you though, I suppose it's all very well and good me standing here and saying step into your discomfort zone, but I think one of the things, and I talk about this a lot with my team, I think one of my greatest worries at the moment is I'm not entirely sure that it is the message from culture actually that we are having at the moment. I think, you know, well, we all know we're still doing participation, you know, medals at school. You get a medal for first place, you get a medal for last place. We're still doing rainbow markings because we feel kids are too fragile to feel the sting of a red pen. We call this generation, which is probably by looking at you, most of you, you are called Generation Snowflake. And you know, I mean, of course, it's a pejorative term, but it's alluding to your fragility and the idea that you crumble under pressure, which, of course, I don't believe is true. We even, you know, I think we coddle ourselves, and I know that I've been guilty of doing that. You know, we choose to exist in an online world where we only ever need to bump up against the opinions and the worldviews of people whose views of the world chime with our own. And I really do think it's setting us up for a very, very dangerous place. So my advice to you before I leave you today is do step into your discomfort zone, even if it is as much as seeing divergent points of view and accepting them. You know, you don't have to agree with them, but listening is the key. You know, the human mind and body is made, it is made for a little bit of stress. It's made to be challenged. So please, you know, today, tomorrow, maybe this week, do something which doesn't make you scared, but which makes you feel challenged. Thank you. I'm going to get some water. Oh.
Thank you, Farrah.
You're very welcome.
That was fabulous. So just to explain, I'm going to ask Farrah a few questions, and then I'm going to throw the questions open to the audience. So start thinking now of your great questions, and you can push Farrah into her discomfort zone. So before I start, actually, I loved the book. I really loved the book. And one of the little tips Farrah had in it was, if you're me, and if you're a bit nervous that you might forget all the good questions, write them on your hand. So
very chic.
Just in case, I have my 4 questions I can ask Farrah, but luckily enough, I think I've remembered them. So my first question, one of the things I loved about your book was you're obviously a born storyteller, and it's full of stories about people who've pushed themselves that bit harder, or who've approached a problem in an interesting way, kind of gone round rather than gone through, or who've just fought through a very difficult situation. Right. What's your favourite story, or the favourite person?
Well, there were 2 stories actually which stood out, and I really should say that the lady that survived the 7/7 bombings, but I'm not going to. Mm-hmm. She's amazing. I mean, she is an incredible woman. But actually, my 2 favourite stories. One is, there's a lady called Marcia Kilgore who some of you may know, or you'll certainly know her product. So she's very, very rare in that she's a serial entrepreneur. So she has success after success. She launched Bliss Spa, which some of you may know Bliss products. It was kind of the first spa, really kind of cool, cutting-edge spa. She launched Fit Flop, I think it's called. Soap and Glory, you'll know these beauty products. She was amazing because she really she was very poor. She was born dirt poor, but very, very bright. Never had any contacts in the world, didn't really have a chance, but through sheer grit and determination, she became this huge success. The reason I like her story is because she articulated something, which I'm going to share with you now, because it really, out of the whole book, she was the person that when I listened to her, I was like, that's exactly what it's like. And she said, there's a massive difference, Farrah. She goes, don't ever get wedded to the idea of success, because success, a bit like, I think, happiness, it's this teetering moment at the top of the mountain, and it is over. And actually, I remember someone once saying, success always feels like you're never quite there. It really does feel like that sometimes. But she said, what you have to know is that most of life is grind. But grind is really good, because grind is it's friction and it's hard, but you feel like you are moving somewhere. And she said it's really important to know the difference between a grind and a slog. And a slog, of course, is when you're just banging away and nothing is happening, nothing changes. And that's why I always say to some of my team, there's no such thing as having a terrible job. I've had some jobs where I've been so miserable. But actually, they're really important jobs, because they are, so you know when a job is a challenge, when it's a grind, and you know when a job is a slog. So she articulated it very well. The other thing that I just found really funny was the chap that started Tinder. It's funny for lots of ways, mainly because he said he's a very, very quiet chap. And he was like, you know, I only ever started Tinder, Farrah, because I was nervous about meeting girls, and when I went over, I was rejected once. I wanted to make sure that I knew that she was going to be interested.
To share that experience with the whole
exactly.
world.
And of course, it all changed very differently because, you know, what human natures do when they have a phone in front of them is interesting. But he was really interesting because, again, with Tinder, they only had a very short amount of time in which to create this app. And they had to make it cool because there were so many dating apps out there at the time. They didn't really, people think, oh, well, it's Silicon Valley. Well, of course, it's not, it's LA. They didn't have a lot of money. And so they were genius. They said, first of all, they're like, well, we need to recruit students. But also the genius thing that I found was they had really no marketing budget. They had about $1,000. And so they said, okay, where do the cool people go? Because if we get the cool people, then everybody will want to use this app. And they printed the fire symbol on these big stickers, as big as they could get them. And they went to Coachella and they stuck them on toilets, on everywhere. So people thought Coachella had been sponsored by Tinder. And they were like, what is this thing? And then they'd go in the street and go stop people and go, hey, are you on this app, Tinder? And it worked. So I like that story because, you know, it's something we all know. But it started from a really humble place.
Oh, fantastic. My next question then. Do you think, this is a Women in Business lecture series,
right.
Do you think it's harder for women to step out of their comfort zone? Do you think there's something about the way we raise our girls that well, I've got 2 children, a boy and a girl, and I do sometimes worry that I protect my daughter a little more than I protect my son.
Or maybe you've answered the question. I mean, I'm not a mother, so I don't know. But one of the things I can tell you is, I mean, I grew up with that. It was that the girls are coddled. The girls need looking after. The boys can... And I thought it was terrible because my dad allowed the boys to have partners, girlfriends. The girls were not allowed. So I think you're right. But one of my things when I think about my girls, which of course is... And boys, we have a big male audience at Cosmo, is when I joined Cosmo, I got rid of the Cosmo tone of voice. So when you edit a magazine, every magazine is supposed to have the Cosmo voice, the Marie Claire voice. And I was like, no. You want divergent voices. And actually, you want things when you turn that page, because magazines are all about discovery, right? You want to read things which actually rile you and you go, I'm not sure I agree. I don't know how I feel about this. So actually what we do, and Danny who works with me, don't we? That's one of our things. It's like, is this going to get debate? Is this going to... Are people going to find this magazine, some of the things in it, uncomfortable to read? So I think you're right. I think they do. And for me, when I'm talking about magazines, I don't think men's magazines... Well, they're all gone now. But yeah, I think so. But I'd be interested to see whether it's changed now, because actually I don't think women... I think women are really tough. We just maybe think about it a bit more. But I think that's right, because actually I think... and I don't like to generalise about the sexes too much, but I think there's this belief, isn't there, that men have a bit more confidence, and so they go into things, and women, they sit back and they think about it. But actually, I think that's a real skill, because actually the thing about discomfort is you don't just throw yourself into anything. You go in with a plan. That's it. And because all you want is control. You want the illusion that you have control. That's all anybody wants. So if you think about things and you think you have control of the situation, you're more likely to go into your discomfort zone, but also make a success of it. And I think women are really, really good at that.
So my final question to you is, and I think you talk about it a bit in the book, and you talked about it tonight, was about the fact that when you joined Cosmopolitan, about 60%, 70%?
I think it was like nearly 80%. Yeah, it was most
Everyone
people.
left?
Yeah, most people.
And you've got a really interesting chapter on sort of surviving social discomfort, or I can't remember what the title of it is, but it's about basically, you know, we all want to be liked, and that can be a dangerous thing. So do you think you can lead if you also want to be liked?
I think you shouldn't aim to be liked. I think you should aim to be respected. I think if you are liked as a byproduct of that, amazing. The thing is, you don't get to go and have drinks. That's why I always say to my team, you know, Danny will go, we're going for drinks. And I'm like, you don't want me there. Honestly, trust me. You do not want... See, she's saying they do. You do not want me there. And actually, I think somebody said that. It was a gentleman who... I had some great male mentors as well. He said, Farrah, let them go for drinks. They will talk about you. And that is absolutely what bonds them together. And give them some money. Let them go and buy drinks. Let them gossip about you and your life. That is right. So... but
I wonder if it's harder for women. Whether women are just a little bit less comfortable with not being liked.
Well, I just say deal with it. Do you know what? You don't get to have both. Choose.
No, I agree. You have to choose.
And that is the reality, isn't it? It's like the top. it ain't always so nice at the top, and so you have to know it comes with these caveats, which is you don't
we're
get
warning you all,
yeah,
future leaders
you don't
out there.
get to
Can't be liked.
go down the pub and everybody's go, isn't my boss amazing? Because at some point you are going to have a difficult conversation with them, and you know, so no. But I hope people. Well, you are going to say yes. I hope people like me. I hope people respect me. Yeah, I hope people respect me.
I'm sure they respect you. On that note, I'm now going to turn the questions over to the audience, to you guys. I have two requests. Please, if you ask a question, can you make it a question? And my
as opposed to what, a monologue?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
And my second request is that you please say who you are and your affiliation.
And your full name, because I always think full name is important. Your
full name and where you're from. And wait for the mic to come to you. So who wants to ask a question? So person there in the middle of the row with the kind of plum jacket.
Hi, my name's Surya Jones. I'm from New York originally, but I'm here with a custom program at LSE. And my question is, in what ways can you create discomfort zones besides just going into them in your daily life, or not even daily life, but just in general, so you have more opportunities to grow if you feel as though it's kind of you're slogging rather than grinding?
So the question is, should you create your own discomfort zones?
Yeah, or how can you?
Yeah, well, actually, and that's preferable. You know, actually just finding yourself in a discomfort zone is not actually that great. You can, if after a while you get, you know, I was saying in the green room earlier, someone said to me, it's better to have 20 different experiences in a year than 20 years of experience of the same thing. So by practice, when you find yourself in a discomfort zone, you'll be able to deal with it. But absolutely, actually, what you should be doing is you should be putting yourself into one by choice. That goes back to control. And that, of course, comes down to being pretty self-aware, knowing what you're... do you know, I think most people, when you get to a certain age, and I think by the time you get into your 20s, you know when you're coasting. You know when you are going in and you're feeling fine, but you're feeling flat. I mean, you know, I always say an amazing thing, and people think I'm a real masochist for this, but there's nothing better than when you go home at the end of the day and you go, God, I had a really hard day, but God, I got through it. That's a sign that you are pushing yourself and you're probably in a manageable discomfort zone. If you're going home every night and you haven't got anything, and I'm talking about work here, you haven't got anything to say, you can't remember what you did, I would say you're coasting, but you will know that. Most people do if they're honest with themselves. Does that answer your question? There's a gentleman who got his hand up really quickly.
Okay.
I feel bad 'cause he's at the
person
back.
right on the back with the kind of glasses and the...
But now he's going to ask me a really hard question.
Thanks for your talk. It's really inspiring. Like, I'm sorry that my name is Ambrose, and exchange student from Hong Kong. Like, I would like to know how you really step out of your comfort zone in terms of like intercultural communication or like meeting people with different nationality. Or second question is like, do you have any recommendation of like working person, or for me a student, to really step out of their comfort zone? Thanks so much. You mean with meeting people? Yeah. It's really hard, isn't it? It's well, you know, being a journalist sometimes, and Danny, you'll back me up on this, it's really hard because sometimes when you're a journalist, you have to, you meet someone for the first time if you're interviewing someone, and they usually have a very, very different life experience to you. And so you have to find commonality really quickly. I always say, and you may have found this, it was like a Spanish Inquisition, in the green room I was asking you lots of questions, and the reality is most people love, that's why I asked you all a question at the beginning, you know, it was to take away the attention from me, and it was to think about everyone's favourite subject themselves. You ask people questions, but you need to go in with a real killer question. So, I don't know, before, you know what I used to do when I first started out, and I used to have to go to parties by myself when I was a journalist, is I used to read what was happening in the news, and I was like, well, there's going to be someone that's got an opinion on this, and I would ask somebody an open-ended question going, you know, this was in the news, what do you think about that? And they'll monologue. Do you know what I mean? they will. And so that's, ask them questions about themselves, and hopefully they'll return in kind. They will ask you, and if they don't, then I'd move on to the next person.
Okay, could we have the person at the back there in the black jacket, sort of, yeah, on the edge?
Good evening. My name is Irene Boo-Riverson, and I work at the University of Westminster. Would you be happy for a student to work shadow you for a day?
Well, no. Did you say it was Irene?
Yes, it's Irene.
Irene, on my Instagram at the moment, I'm giving away a mentorship. So it's pretty much that. And I don't think anyone's entered. Well, I think a few people have entered. So I don't do work shadowing, mainly because my day is just me saying to Danny, can you cut my apple in half for me? I haven't got time. But I do a lot of stuff on my social media, because one of my big things at Cosmo was the media is pretty elitist, right? It's very difficult to get a break in there. So we advertise all our jobs on my Instagram now. I give away the mentorship on that. We're about to give away. So if you have any students, it's in the January issue, the scholarship. We're doing 4 scholarships. We've never done it before, but the difference about these scholarships is we're doing everything. So we will house you, we'll pay your food, we'll pay your travel, and you basically get a complete training for a whole month, and all of these scholarship winners will live together in this house. So that's even better. So, you know, forget work shadowing me. There is the mentoring session, which is live now, but the scholarship, because, you know, we put competitions out there for people who haven't got a journalism degree, perhaps they haven't even got A-levels. We put it out there because we're looking for people with voices. And you'd be amazed at people that don't apply. I don't know if people think, well, there's 2 types of people out there. There's people who think I'm going to win, and there's people who think, well, I might, and then they never enter. And you'd be surprised at the number of people that don't enter these. They're really amazing competitions.
Great ask, by the way. Okay, the person in the green jumper with blonde hair, just sort of on my right, a bit further down. Yep.
Hello, I'm Emma. I'm a social researcher.
What's your surname, Emma?
Glassy.
Classy?
Glassy. Like Glassey.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for your talk. It kind of made me think about the phenomenon of self-care. And by that, I mean the kind of trend that you sort of see around where people choose not to put themselves in perhaps uncomfortable or what they might deem negative situations with people, whether that's like a social occasion or I don't really feel like I want to do that. And it made me, your talk made me question where you draw the line. So where do you draw the line between kind of doing something that is putting yourself in your discomfort zone for a positive reason, but also kind of where do you draw the line and kind of pulling yourself back and saying, actually, that isn't going to benefit me?
Yeah, and you will know, Emma, because not all discomfort zones work out for people, and that's why when I was talking to this lady, whose name I've forgotten, Surga. Say it again.
Surya, I think.
Surya, okay. You've got to choose. The best discomfort zones come when you choose to actively put yourself in it, and if you do that, then generally it's going to be a good thing because people pretty much know themselves. But of course, sometimes it doesn't work. You step into there and it's just too much. And the thing is, you know when you're out of your depth and you're out of control, and that's when you need to retreat. But I think the whole concept of self-care, I mean, self-care, my understanding of self-care is also just, look after yourself. Whether that's yoga, whether that's, whatever. I don't think, although it may have manifested itself, it may have turned into this, self-care shouldn't be about, well, just protect yourself from anything negative, because I'm not sure I believe that's right, actually. I don't think that's good. If we all lived, it's like when all those books were out about happiness and everyone thought they had to be happy the whole entire time. Of course, that wasn't the point of all these happiness books. Of course it wasn't. And I think with self-care, I think the true message is, because, there's an anxiety epidemic going on, take care of yourself, take time out. I don't think, and I hope it hasn't become this, just coddle yourself from difficult situations, because that's really, I think that's dangerous ultimately.
Can I also add that I think when I read your book, one of the things that came through in the length of your book is that I think it was you gradually build up to it. You don't throw yourself into doing a speech in front of this kind of audience. Don't start there. You very much describe it in your own history. Start with you make a small speech at a family event.
Yeah.
You know, baby steps. You know, you just don't push yourself so hard that you just think, actually, I can't cope, I'm going to give up.
Yeah.
You know, really, all of this stuff gets easier when you just incrementally build it up.
That's
anyway,
when the gut works, because it's the pattern recognition, right? You can rely on it.
I coped with it last time, I can cope with it.
That's it.
Again.
Same thing, bigger audience, that's all.
Who, person there in the green jumper with the glasses on the right, back there.
Hi, I'm Alan, and I'm from San Francisco, but I'm just in town until Thanksgiving. But anyways, my question was, I don't know if I'm speaking for everyone, but for me at least, when I think of moving outside of your comfort zone, I think about like loneliness. Like, how do you deal with that kind of like solitude when you're outside of your comfort zone? Thank you. Great speech, by the way.
Thank you. So hang on, so if loneliness is the problem, how do you remedy that? How do you get out of that? I mean, that's a whole other speech. I mean, that's that is no, but I get it, because you know what, I like being alone. I like my own company, but sometimes it can be too much. And you generally know why. I mean, it's a bit like the chap at the back. It's like you. The problem is, isn't it, with when you like your own company, is you start to spend more and more time by yourself, and I have done this, my husband does this, and then it becomes more and more difficult to get out, and then you start to think, God, if I go to a social occasion, am I going to overlap, or because I haven't spoken to anyone? So you can't get to the point, really, you know, because in some people, if you're an introvert, you may be an introvert, I don't know, I naturally am. Your inclination is to just spend time alone, but you can't keep on doing that. You have to, if like, you know, you want 4 nights of the week by yourself, you need to shake that up a bit. You need to have one night where you go out and you speak to people, because it breeds itself, you know. It's the more you do it, the more, I'm being very inarticulate. Am I answering this question at all? Okay.
Okay, where's someone easily reachable? So quite a lot at the back. The gentleman with your side, further near the back. I was about to say with his hand up. That's not very helpful, is it?
Man with his hand up.
Yes, this gentleman here.
Hi, I'm Anthony, and I'm a gap year student.
Hang on, I can't see where. My eye off. Oh, hi.
Yeah. A lot of the examples you gave are related to solving or facing a difficult situation rather than a specific setback. Do you have any advice or examples for overcoming failure?
Yeah, well, I mean, failure is really interesting. I mean, again, that's like a whole other speech, and I do a whole chapter in the book on failure, because, of course, now Silicon Valley think failure is this wonderful thing, and failure is really interesting, because failure, of course, or setback as you call it, I don't think for a start we should be calling them setbacks. It depends how the failure happens. So if the failure occurs because of carelessness, then that's not good failure, right? But if the failure occurs because of, and we see this with Jeff Bezos, who founded Amazon, he's obsessed with failure, or obsessed with it. If the failure occurs because you are going into uncharted territory where there's no information, you're probably going to fail, because you've got to take a risk, right? And so some people go, yeah, that's good failure. Well, it's not. That's only half of good failure. Good failure is actually looking back and combing through what went wrong. And I remember Sean Rad, who founded Tinder, because he said actually it was beset with problems. He said, I always try to ask why 5 times. Often it's more, until you wring out exactly what happened. And of course, you know, in Silicon Valley, they have failure parties now where they celebrate. So you've got to take the shame out of failure. But also, failure is a really amazing way to get a piece of information that nobody else has had. But you've got to be brave enough to turn and look behind you and comb through what happened. But I think failure is really important if it's done with the right motives.
So Farrah, tell the story of who Jeff Bezos has taken on to head up his Amazon Fresh.
Oh God, do you know what? I can't remember that now. But yes, well, Jeff Bezos, he is obsessed. So every shareholder letter I think he's done, he talks about failure. And they had Amazon. This isn't the HelloFresh, but this is Amazon had a phone. I think it was called the Fire. was a car crash. And I remember he made a talk going, God, if you think that was a failure, we've got loads more failures coming your way. And actually, he often hires, I cannot remember now because it's so long ago since I wrote the book, but actually the guy, or I think it was two guys, he hired to run, I don't know if it's called Amazon Fresh, it's like their food delivery.
Yeah, the story that I read it this weekend.
Okay, well then you. But
was that there was a group of people who just had the most car crash of a firm in doing food delivery.
Yeah.
I mean, they burnt through so much money. It had been, everything that could go wrong had gone wrong, and he hired that team to head up his Amazon Fresh because he wanted the ones that had
had the
made every mistake, learnt every painful, gut-wrenching message there was to be learned. And I thought, well, you're putting your money where your mouth is there.
And I think when you do job interviews now, people will be asked more and more. I start to ask it, what's been your biggest failure? And it's really interesting to see how people, how they talk about it, are they embarrassed about it? And also, how did they deal with it in the aftermath? You will start to see that more and more. I mean, actually, I think Facebook at the moment, they're doing, which you should have done for me, they don't do CVs of all your achievements. They do failure CVs where they talk about everything that they failed at. So I think culturally the messaging around failure is changing.
Yeah. I think you need to be proud of your failures, and
if it's done in the right way.
If it's done the right way, so be proud of them. And also, if someone asks you, if you can't think of anything you failed at, then either you're really unimaginative, you've really stayed too far within your comfort zone, or you're just not really a human being, I think. But anyway, okay, right. Could we have someone from down this side here, please? Person at the front in a navy gilet. Yeah, thank you.
Hi there, my name's Elrika. I just want to say thank you for your talk. I go back to your talk title, how to succeed outside your comfort zone. And I'm just wondering, do you have any advice for all the women out in here who want to ask guys out? Because that tends to be something that's really out of a girl's comfort zone. So I was wondering, how would a girl deal in that situation?
There you go, Farrah. Well, it's been a long time since I was single. And my entire dating history, I only ever asked men out. I don't think I've ever been asked out by a man in my life, but I did it because, again, it goes back to control. You choose. You don't want to end up with some guy, well, he just asked me out. I just kind of went for it. But what I used to do, and this is not really good dating advice, but obviously, please do not put this anywhere. Please don't put it on your social media. But when I was about 19, I was always, and so you have to know what you want in a man. And one of my things that I really like in men, and actually in women as well, is quite eccentric people. I like quite unusual people. And so IKEA, I think they still sell them, they sell these finger puppets. They've got like a frog and a sheep. And I would go out on a night out and I'd have the finger puppets. And if I saw someone I fancied, this is really bad advice, by the way. If I saw somebody I fancied on the dance floor, I'd put the frog on and I'd tap them on the shoulder. But it was brilliant, it was foolproof, because actually the blokes that were like, oh my God, you're a weirdo, I was not interested in. But the guys that found it funny, there was an instant connection. They were generally really quite surreal in their thinking. So that's a really good anecdote. But I think being inventive when you, I don't think anybody goes up to people now and goes, hey, do you want to go out? I think do something unusual and surprising. All anybody wants in a world of sameness is somebody that's surprising. And if they don't, the fact that you're at this lecture tonight, you have a curious mind. So that's probably what you're going to want in a partner, right? So you don't have to, I mean, IKEA do still sell those things. But even if it's asking someone like, I often ask people like quite intense questions when I first meet them, because it's a really good measure of what they are like. So you need to think of a killer question or have a killer prop. And then see what happens. It makes it a bit more natural.
So, I love the way this is where our women in business conversation
Sorry.
is going.
Sorry.
No. Great question. Okay. Person at the back in the red top.
Hi, my name's Carly and I'm from Needle and Thread. Something you said was don't aim to be liked, aim to be respected.
Needle and Thread, as in the dress company?
Yeah.
I love your dresses.
I
love them.
I love them.
Amazing.
I wore it for my book launch.
Oh,
your
that's
black
so
dresses.
good.
Very nice. Sorry.
No, not at all. It's a really good thing you said about don't aim to be liked, aim to be respected. And one thing that I do at work and outside of work is really focus on being liked. And really all I want to do is be respected. But I spend so much time, I guess, trying to be liked that I lose the respect part. So have you got any advice on kind of how to gain that respect quickly without trying to do the friend zone with everyone?
Stop being nice. No, you can have respect and be nice. Well, you know what, I always say to my team, it's like the thing with being the boss, and I presume you're one of the bosses there, is unfortunately, or fortunately actually, you've got to have the toughest conversations that nobody else will have. You have to work later, you have to always prove. I don't think the days of, when if you were the boss, people thought, just do what they say. I don't think it's like that anymore. I think actually, in a weird way, as a boss, you have to constantly prove to people. There's still a hierarchy, because someone's ultimately got to take all the flack, but I think you have to constantly prove to your team why you're the boss, and that sometimes means, it means working the longer hours, doing the really difficult stuff, not handing it over to somebody else. Often, sometimes, I still try and edit every single piece in the magazine, and people think, well, you're mad, stop doing the doing. I think doing the doing is the really important bit, because while some people would say, well, you should delegate that, I actually think there comes real comradeship in a boss going, I am willing to do exactly what you are doing. Not all the time, of course, you can't, but I find that is the way, I hope. Is that how you get, do you respect me?
What's the poor girl going to say?
Hey, you wouldn't cross me.
Yeah.
See?
I said she was scary. What about having a good mentor? Because it's lonely. It's lonely when you're the boss.
Yeah,
so
it is.
You have a very nice bit in your book about the importance of having a really tough mentor.
Yeah, I think so. So there are a couple of things. There's a couple of things I believe about mentors. One is in the book I talk about having a care coach, actually, and the care coach is somebody, for you it would be somebody in your building, but probably not somebody in your direct team, but it's somebody who understands the job that you do. And what you do with a care coach is, because the thing about feedback, right, it's horrible to take feedback, but it's equally horrible to give feedback to people. And as a boss, you will know that. You don't like doing it. So when you identify this person, and it can't be a family friend, it can't really be someone you're very, very close to at work, you need to put aside a very specific amount of time with them. And when you meet with them every month or whatever, I often think it's really good to warn them what you want to talk about. So you don't just sit there with your mentor and go, God, I had a really bad day today. You don't get to have that with a mentor. Mentors are usually really busy people. But what you could do is you go, well, my problem is at the moment, and I think it's too vague to say, you do want to be liked. It's not that you want to be disliked. I could tell you how to be disliked very quickly. But I think it's too vague to go, how do I get respected? You need to be very specific and go, I had this incident today. How, when I go into that situation again, how do I get respect? And I think as well, when you have a mentor, remember, it can be hard for mentors, so you have to smile, you have to say thank you, and you have to be specific to get as much as you can. The other thing about mentors is, I was saying to you, I personally don't agree in mentors for very long periods of time. I think you get moments with mentors, like momentary mentorship in a way. And I think mentors, you don't get to hang on to them. They're very special people in your lives, and they come and they go, and that's absolutely right. Because actually, if you hang on to them for too long, it just becomes a moaning session. And actually, your mentor is no use to you if you're just coming in and slagging off your boss. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Did that answer the question? Okay. No one ask me about dating, please, because it's going to take a really dark turn. I just know.
Can we have someone, well, I know it's difficult, but the person right in the middle, long brown hair. Yep, perfect, thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, no, great, you do it, and then we'll go, and then we'll go, and then we'll go back.
Longish brown hair.
It's because I'm not allowed to say... I'm not allowed to say lady or gentleman. I have to say person.
Oh, well,
which
I
makes
did.
you,
oh,
yeah,
well,
exactly.
there you go.
So you mentioned going, I find going out of my comfort zone to be quite distressing, and sort of there's a lot of pressure there.
Right.
So so how would you, and you mentioned stage fright and shutting down. So how do you sort of avoid shutting down and that kind of
Well, it all comes down to that. Oh, did we get your name? So it all goes down to what I said earlier, which is you only so when you and you know when you're frightened, right? You feel it. I mean, you know, maybe speaking now, you feel those sensations. You have only a couple of literally nanoseconds in which to tell yourself that actually, and it feels so simple, and people think, well, it can't be true, but I do this all the time. You just have to tell yourself when you're in that moment and you're breathing really deeply, you're like, oh God, I feel this way because I'm really fired up, I'm really challenged. And honestly, something changes. The minute you start entertaining the notion of, it's because I'm scared, it's really quite a powerful effect. It will overwhelm you. So you can't even think about the F word in that moment. You have to think about challenge and excitement. You have to.
My name's Fazine. I'm an undergraduate student at LSE, and I think it's so great how far you've come in your career, but I just want to know, do you have any regrets, particularly on your work-life balance, and do you think, if not now, will you have regrets in the future?
Oh, you know, I spoke very publicly. I chose not to have kids, and I mean, look, I couldn't have children. It wasn't happening. I just think we didn't have enough sex, personally. But it wasn't happening. And actually, when I was forced to make the decision about do we go down the path of IVF, I'd just taken on Cosmo. Now, that's not to say you can't have a high-powered job and you can't have kids, because you can. But for me, I didn't feel that I could. I just didn't think I wasn't the sort of person. You see these women and they can do it all, and I'm not that person. And so I made a decision that actually I was going to choose my career. And actually, the difference is, of course, I didn't have, you know, some women, they really have that ovarian ache, and I didn't have that. But I may have it, and it may be too late, and so I don't know. And the truth is, I can't tell you whether it's a regret or not, because I simply don't know. And I really honestly believe this. I don't think there's any such thing as the right decision, but I think you make the decision right for you. So, you know, my decision, people go, well, you might regret not having kids. I can't entertain that. I have to decide that this was the right decision for me, and I'll make it that way. So I'm sure, you know, do I have regrets? There will be, but I try not. I would say there's a lady here, I don't know where she is, but she interviewed me just before we came on stage, and she said, I think it was something like, what's advice? Where is she? Ah, there she is. She did a very good interview, and she said to me, what would you tell your younger self? And it was something that I've only came to very recently, and I said, what you need to do is you need to get yourself a rule book of what is important to you. So for me, like creativity, time alone is important. It's a big long list. You need to get a rule book, because the reality is you are going to change. That is the only thing we are certain of. You will not be the same person at 20 as you are at 40 or 50. I'm not the same person. But you got to make sure that what's really important to you doesn't change. And so I think if you stand by that, if you get yourself a rule book and you live by that, and if you stray from it, you hold yourself accountable, I think you'll hopefully never regret a moment. That's what I hope.
Thank you.
So I'd like to echo, there is no such thing as the right decision. There are always, if there's one takeaway from this evening, I'd like it to be that one. Could we have the person down here with the pink scarf and the white shirt?
Hi, my name is Paula. I'm half Spanish, half Belgian. I'm doing my master's at LSE now. And my question it was kind of based off what she just asked about your work-life balance. How do you take that? Because the whole thought of like women can't have it all, like you either have to choose between your job or your family or your partner. I just want to know, like, if you have any tips for that, how do you manage that?
Well, you don't say you can have it all. I mean, I wrote a piece about this. It's like Cosmo came up with, you can have it all, and it's not. I don't feel. Do you know, even those women who, when I talk to them about can you have it all, and they do, they went, no, because something gives, and that's
you cannot have it all.
And you shouldn't want to have it all, actually. It's like with the happiness, you shouldn't want to be happy all the time. And I always say it's about having it all-ish. So again, you've got to decide if you have it all-ish, what do you get in that? And so for me, I wanted countryside living. I wanted dogs. I wanted a husband who was creative, and I wanted a job where I was pushed, but I was still writing. But I didn't get to have the kids. Now, of course, it's not to say that you can't You can't not have a high-powered job and have kids, and I have to reiterate that because I think some people did think I meant, well, you can't do both. Of course you can, but you know the parameters. But I honestly think like having it all is probably a more noble and realistic expectation of yourself. I think if you set yourself up for, I've got to have it all, you'll never, I don't think you'll ever feel quite fulfilled, really.
Person right at the back with a headscarf.
You're going to tell me you have it all now?
Gold-coloured headscarf.
Thank you. I'm Nisa. I'm LSE alumni. I was just wondering, what is your motivation in life? And if you have a role model, who is that person and for which reason? Thank you.
What's my motivation in life? God, that's a very good question. Well, I guess my motivation, you know what, and again, I've only come to it recently. I think my motivation and why I do things is I'm interested in dialogue, I'm interested in words. And so my motivation, whether it's with the circle of friends I move with or whether it's the magazine I put out, it's to bring together divergent points of view. I think it's really, really important. And the fact that you don't have to agree with everybody. In fact, often I think you shouldn't surround yourself with people who agree with you. So that's my motivation, particularly from my journalism. And my husband, we really don't agree on a lot, but it makes, as long as you don't blame the other person, there's no right or wrong, it makes for an interesting dynamic. Do I have a role model? Yeah, I don't actually have a role model. I have, a bit like the mentors, I have role models in the moment. There are people that I will be sat in a meeting with, like I was sat in a meeting with our chief finance officer today, and I've only found out that she's an amazing, she's our number 2 in the company, and she used to be a barrister, and I was looking at her just thinking, God, you're a really amazing woman. She's so down to earth, and she just gets things. She's the quietest person in the room, but when she speaks, she's the person everybody defers to. So I think I find role models. I mean, even Danny went undercover for 9 months writing a feature on an online suicide cult. It was a really brave piece. She was a role model for me when she did that piece. I've never done anything like that in my career. So I think you should look for role models in the everyday, because everybody has a bit of role model in them. And most role models, if you have one person, they say, don't they, it's the cliche, like heroes, they invariably disappoint you.
We have someone from this side of the room, maybe at the back, dark hair, blue-grey t-shirt. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Janice. I'm Janice Jacob, and I'm doing my master's here in LSE. So my question, okay, it might be a bit personal. I mean, it might be my case, but sometimes when I'm in a very in a very discomfortable situation, instead of not trying at all, I end up trying too hard. So where you end up overthinking, and it's not a state where you are very creative or efficient or productive. So how would you, I mean, do you have any suggestions for that? How would you manage that, like drawing the line between trying hard and trying too hard, where it ends up in an inefficient state?
Are you talking basically about the curse of perfectionism?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have the same problem sometimes. I mean, you know, when if I could, I would do everything. I mean, I'm like you, and sometimes I can overthink things. And often, just as a tip, when I'm, you know, when you're overthinking things, you start to get cloudy. And again, that starts to feel like a slog, doesn't it? Because you're not actually getting anywhere. I go for a walk. I have 2 dogs, and I go for a walk. And it's amazing when you stop, the answer somehow comes to you. So that's where it goes back to the self-care. Self-care, I think she's gone now, the lady. Self-care and discomfort, they kind of should work hand in hand, actually. One can help the other. And I think, you know, if you go into something, you have to, I think sometimes perfectionism comes because you care so much about what other people think of you, their expectations, unless, of course, you're the sort of person who actually just puts the expectation on yourself. You know, if I do something uncomfortable, I often try now to make a list of, say, no more than 10, 5 is best, of things that you can achieve in that situation. Any more, it's just not doable. So if you make your list, I find making lists and keeping to numbers is very, very helpful, because it stops you straying out. Again, it goes back to being very specific. But honestly, if you're getting to that point where you're just not making any traction, it's so simple, but you need to get out. You know, when people go, I've got to stay in and do this work, you need the night out on the town, because in the morning you'll come back to it and you will somehow find the answer. Okay, I think we've got time for one more question.
person right in the front row with the pink polo neck, dark glasses, or dark rimmed glasses.
Hiya, I'm Francesca Shilcock. I'm a journalism student at Roehampton. We've spoken a bit about failure this evening, which is obviously really important. How do you measure success? And does it come from purely being within your discomfort zone and coming out the other side?
Not always, but I think the thing that discomfort does is, for me, success for me has always been when I've discovered something surprising about myself, or I've achieved something, but it sometimes has a different outcome to what I thought. And I think when you go into your discomfort zone, that's what I was saying about obstacles are really important, because actually they teach you a lot about weaknesses, but also strengths. Success is so vague a concept, and I think it's really dangerous to say, I want to be successful, because if you say, you know, when you ask sometimes kids and they're like, I want to be successful, well, that's really dangerous, because it's so vague that actually you need a very specific beacon of light to know where you're going. So I always knew kind of I wanted to be an editor. And if you know what you want to be and what success looks like, then you don't get sidetracked. And when obstacles appear, you don't take different routes and avoid it, because then if you keep doing that, your life goes horizontal. You know those people, and there's someone in the book who I know very well, who every time she came up against an obstacle, because she just knew she wanted to,
Loved that story.
Did you? Yeah, she just wanted to be, she actually just wanted to be famous, but she just wanted to be successful. And so every time she was met with something difficult, she went a sideways way. And until it got to the point in her life, and I'm sure you know lots of people like this, is they start to get really toxic, and they look at other people who are ahead of them in life and they go, oh, life's just not fair. If I got all the breaks, then I'd be over there. Well, of course you wouldn't be, because you didn't do the hard stuff. You didn't go into your discomfort zone. But going into your discomfort zone is made so much easier by knowing what is on the other side. If you're not specific about that, if you just want to be successful, it's going to be really hard, and I think you're going to take a lot of diversions.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think sadly it's time now to wrap up.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Farrah, on behalf... We are really grateful.
Oh, no, you're very welcome. Very good audience.
And I was saying to Farrah, she's loads better than all the lecturers. Just a reminder, the Discomfort Zone is available to purchase outside of the foyer, and I believe you're going to be hanging around just for a little bit.
Yes, I can do, yes.
And it's great. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Farrah.
Thank you.